And now, coming to you recorded from the Classroom 108 in beautiful Pima Medical Institute in Phoenix, Arizona, it is the lecture for Chapter 10. So here we go. Please turn to page 180 in your textbook. Follow me, and we're going to have some pictures to look at, and it's going to be really nice. Okay. In the introduction, it says approximately 51.4 million inpatient procedures are performed in the U.S. each year. Inpatient procedures. So these are procedures that require hospitalization. That's not including the ambulatory surgery centers that also contribute great numbers to the amount of surgeries that are performed each year. And guess who's responsible for safely cleaning and making sure that everything is sterile and ready for all of the surgery cases? What has two thumbs and is sitting in that chair you're sitting in right there? Okay. It's us. It's the CS techs. We're responsible for that. That is the core of what we do. Okay, so there are a lot of instruments. So my computer seems to be wacky right now. Okay, there's a lot of instruments. There's nobody who knows all the instruments. I mean, well, okay, I can't prove that, but there are so many instruments that really no tech knows them all. In fact, the book says it's impossible for any technician to be able to identify every instrument in existence. Well, this makes sense. You know, you work in a hospital and they're going to do the standard procedures like they're going to open up somebody's abdomen and take out a section of bladder. I'm sorry, I say bladder, I meant bowel. Or maybe they'll take out a piece of the bladder. There are hospitals that do neurosurgery and hospitals that don't do neurosurgery. There are hospitals that do more and varied types of surgeries than others. If you end up working in a surgery center, you're probably not going to do any abdominal cases. So major sets, you're probably not going to see those. But if you end up working in a big hospital like the Mayo Clinic or Banner Desert, you're going to get familiar with a lot of instruments, but still, you're not going to know all the instruments. So there's hundreds and hundreds of instruments. So we have an important role in the instrument selection and inspection. So it says, although many instruments may appear similar, they may have very different functions. This is true. Each one is designed to perform a specific function in the surgeon's hands. If you put the wrong instrument in the surgeon's hands, not you, but the tech who works in the room with the surgeon, that could cause harm to a patient, or maybe worse than just harm. So I can think of a couple examples. I can't think of the names, but there's a vasectomy instrument that looks a lot like a mosquito forceps, but it doesn't function the same way. So if a surgeon was handed this vasectomy clamp thinking he's going to occlude a blood vessel, he would end up cutting the blood vessel instead. Okay, so while identifying and selecting the correct instrument for each set is crucial, knowing how to inspect the instrument is just as important. It's very important. And instruments are not perfect, they're not going to last forever. There's many things you need to inspect for, along with making sure that it's clean. You see, it goes through the process. It comes down from the surgery, it goes into the decontamination room, it gets cleaned, hopefully, and then it gets put through to the other side where it gets inspected and sterilized. So of the many things that need to be done, inspection is one of them. Some basic questions on page 181. Where do instruments come from? They come from factories. It's pretty simple. There's a playlist of videos that I'm going to give you to watch. It shows what happens inside of some of these factories. It's pretty cool if you like to watch machines go and people working, get a little bit of understanding on how these instruments are made. Why must they all be so exacting? Well, the human body is very complex and surgeons need the exact instrument in order to perform specific functions. So devices that appear similar can be used for very different procedures and purposes. So that mosquito clamp that I mentioned earlier, not only, it's a hemostat, which means that it's a blood stopper, but also it can be used for dissecting layers of tissue away from each other. Put it in there, just sort of an opening motion, and the mosquito's jaw just sort of spreads the tissues apart. There are instruments that jump service. So something like the DeBakey forceps, which was originally, Dr. DeBakey was a vascular surgeon, originally designed for the purpose of holding on to wet blood vessel type tissues, has jumped to basically every service because, and oh, by the way, when I say service, I mean like general, gynecological, vascular, orthopedic. It's basically jumped to all of the services because it's a very, very useful instrument. So the human body is complex. They need instruments to do it. Imagine trying to twist in a flathead screw with a Phillips head screwdriver. Okay, it's similar. These are the doctor's tools. Where do instruments get their names? So as discussed in chapter 3, which you may or may not have read, many instruments get their names from the part of the anatomy where they were designed to be used. So instruments are sometimes named after the surgeon who invented them. Bookwalter retractor is an example of that. Dr. John Bookwalter invented this very complicated table-mounted retractor system that has since been sort of copied by other systems. The OmniTract, Omni means all, or like in this case, omnidirectional. And so that's not named for a part of the anatomy or for a doctor, but it still got the name OmniTract. So other doctors that have instruments named for them are DeBakey and Mayo. You've heard of the Mayo Clinic. The two brothers who started the Mayo Clinic actually have innovated several instrument designs. Why are they so expensive? That's a really good question. They're very expensive. There's a lot of work that goes into them. It should be, if you're buying high quality instruments, it's high quality metal. There's a lot of actual manual labor that goes into the production of instruments. You cannot just make everything in a machine. You can start in a machine, they can press out the metal shapes, but then there's a lot of working that needs to be done. The manufacturing process, let's say that it starts with the selection of materials. How are we going to construct this? Are we going to make it out of stainless steel? Does it need to be soft stainless steel? Does it need to be hard stainless steel? So let's say you're going to make a scissors. You want that to be out of stainless steel, and you want it to be out of a hard stainless steel, because if you make it out of a soft stainless steel, then it can lose its cutting edge way too easily, and it can get warped out of shape. So things like scissors and needle holders and mosquito clamps and Kelly clamps, these are made out of a hardened steel that is in the 400 series range. So 400 series steel is magnetic, and it is also called martensitic. Still on page 181. If you need something that must be somewhat malleable, like a malleable ribbon retractor or a rib spreader or a suction, you can use the softer steel that is not magnetic and is called 300 series, and is also called austenitic steel. Okay, so both of these steels are stainless steels. And I need to point out that stainless does not mean stain proof. It means it's more resistant to staining and rusting, but absolutely not stain proof. It can still be stained, rusted, completely destroyed by mistreatment. Okay, other metals that are used to make, or materials I might say, are titanium, copper, silver. These are widely used. Chrome, a lot of instruments are chrome plated. Turn to page 182, please. There's a green box. There's a list of different instruments types and, well, key terms. Austenitic is there, martensitic is there, rib spreaders, forceps, scissors, etc. So I want you to study the key terms. The manufacturing steps. There is a picture of a half of a needle holder that has been stamped out. Look at all the flash, all the extra metal on that. That has to be removed by hand. And then a lot more has to happen to that blank half of a needle holder before it becomes a needle holder. So I'm gonna post the videos. When I post this, I'm gonna post a link to a playlist of how instruments are made. So it says in today's instrument manufacturing environment, there's more reliance on machines than in years past. Despite technical advances, however, there is still a significant amount of the milling process that must be done by hand. Instrument manufacturers perform hundreds of quality checks and finishing applications to every instrument during the manufacturing process to ensure quality. Good, that's what you want. You want a high quality instrument, and you will pay for a high quality instrument. There are lower quality instruments that can be purchased. Usually they're made in Pakistan. It can be single use, or they can be semi-disposable. So these good high quality made in Germany instruments are not single use, and they are not disposable. If they ever break, then they get thrown away, but they're not disposable. So it says, upon completion of the assembly process, instruments undergo a final heating procedure called tempering. This is what makes them hard. It doesn't make them shiny. It doesn't make them stainless. It makes them hard. After tempering, the instruments are polished. Polishing is necessary to achieve a smooth finish, which ultimately determines the final appearance or the finish of the instrument. There's different finishes. There's shiny, which, believe it or not, looks cheap when you're used to seeing the matte finish on everything, the matte or satiny finish where it's not super shiny. You're used to seeing the shiny only on the cheaper semi-disposable Pakistani instruments. It makes the high quality shiny instruments look cheap, which is odd, but they're not cheap. They're actually more expensive. They're more resistant to the staining that could occur. I think a lot of hospitals actually don't like to purchase them, probably for a cost reason, but also because they're shiny and the overhead lights can shine back into the surgeon's eyes when she's cutting. Okay, so the next step in the production is called passivation. This is what makes them stain less. Passivation uses nitric acid to remove all of the iron contents that is on the outside layer of the instrument. So basically, it's causing it to rust very quickly and then remove the rust. That's in a nutshell, that's what's happening. So the passivation layer is not indestructible. It can still be damaged. It's not a layer of material being put on the instrument. It's a layer, the surface layer, where there is iron that has been removed from the instrument. It can be scratched. This is why we have to be careful with the instruments, not bang them around too much. Use abrasive cleaners. Don't mark them with an etching, little electric etcher. We do sometimes like to mark instruments for certain purposes, but never with an etcher. And certain things are bad for the metals, like saline, chlorine. Chlorine is really bad. All right, a couple more key terms: serrations and ratchet, box locks, and passivation. Now we're down to hemostatic forceps. The primary function of hemostatic forceps is to control the flow of blood, the word hemostat. Picture 4 on the next page shows the anatomy and points of inspection of a hemostatic forceps. And 5 shows the correct way to measure the instrument. So most of these instruments, honestly, are measured from end to end, from proximal to distal end. So if you're looking for a 6-inch peon clamp, you would measure it from one end to the other. That's very simple. But now the inspection. These inspection points are very true for many, many, many instruments. The tips, the very tip of the hemostatic forceps, it's called the tips. The tips must be in alignment. So if they're a little bit out of alignment, or that's a lot actually, if they're a little bit out of alignment, that instrument should either be repaired or disposed of and replaced. Tip, let the repair person tell you if the instrument can be repaired or not, because they'll put a tag on it that says it can't be repaired, and then you could probably send it off to be warranty replaced, unless of course it was mistreatment of the instrument that caused it to be damaged or broken. Okay, in the jaw, there are serrations in the jaws of this type of instrument, which will hold on to blood. So it says, inspect the jaw serrations for bioburden. Believe it or not, in that box lock area, you should inspect for, among bioburden, you should inspect for cracks. There's a weak point in there. You can't see, but there's a pin that goes through there and holds the whole assembly together. Otherwise, it would just fall apart. There's a pin that goes through both of those pieces of metal. And it causes a weak spot. And so every time this thing is ratcheted shut, it's putting pressure on the box lock area. So you need to look for cracks. We are going to do instrument inspections in the lab, and we're going to use a magnifier to look for cracks in instruments. Check the shanks and the ratchets and the rings. All of these areas are subject to getting cracks or having bioburden hanging on them. So you got your Hartmann and your Halsted mosquito at the bottom of page 184. They're both called mosquitoes. A Hartmann is 3.5 inches and a Halsted is 5 inches. We techs sort of understand that if somebody says, hey, I'm missing a mosquito, we automatically think Halsted because that's the common one. And if they're actually looking for the shorter Hartmann, they would say like the baby mosquito or the Hartmann or whatever. All right, on page 185, you have an example of serrations. A Kelly and a Cryl are the same instrument with one difference, the serrations. The serrations on a Kelly do not go all the way through the length of the jaw, while on a Cryl they do. What is the real reason why the Kelly has a flat spot in the jaw? I can't tell you. I just, you know what? But I know that sometimes the surgeons use that flat spot in that Kelly as a way, they'll clamp it on a suture and then it doesn't damage the suture and it'll hold on nice and tight. So when they're using a Kelly as a suture tag, or probably also just as extra fingertips when they're suturing, they might want to have that flat spot. So it may matter whether you put a Kelly or a Cryl in a set. I've worked in many hospitals, and I've seen many times when the count sheet for an instrument set will call for Kellys or Cryls, but the other would be in there, and it's been that way forever, and nobody ever cared. It never made a difference. Essentially, those are the same instrument. Okay, needle holders. Inspect the jaws for tread wear. Of course, you check the tip. These needle holders right here with the gold handles, these have an insert in the jaw that is made of tungsten carbide, which is a very hard but brittle metal. You will see chunks of this material missing. You definitely need to do a close-up inspection on the jaws of this needle holder and make sure there's no cracks or tread wear. Inspect the box lock for bioburden. And for some reason, they decided there's an area called the neck on the needle holder instrument. And, you know, just inspect it for bioburden, make sure there's no cracks. On that area they're calling the neck, I've seen a lot of needle holders that will start to rust there. And we'll get to that in a second. Actually, there's a picture. You know what? There's a picture. I swear there's a picture. There's a picture on page 195 of soaking a needle holder in saline. This is very bad. Some things the OR does that are bad for the instruments. This is one of them. Okay. On page 186 now, needle holder jaws, which is the portion that holds the needle, can be manufactured of stainless steel or tungsten carbide. So the stainless steel jaws, there are two patterns of jaw tread. They're smooth or serrated. Stainless steel jaw treads cannot be repaired or rejawed or have the serrations replaced after they wear out. This can occur with 1 or 2 years of use, and then the needle holder must be replaced. You hardly see those anymore. What you do see mostly is the gold handled ones, because if that tungsten carbide insert should crack or wear out, they can actually replace it. They can pull that off of there and make the needle holder like new again. So always when you see the gold, that means there is a tungsten carbide insert. And I have seen these instruments go through the process so many times that the gold has worn off. I actually have a needle holder like this in the lab. The gold is worn off. That's how many times it's gone through. So it might not have the gold anymore. Look at the picture of the CryoWood needle holder and the male Heger needle holder on page 186. These two needle holders are very similar. The CryoWood will hold a lighter needle, which is pulling a lighter suture than the male Heger. So think male Heger medium to heavy suturing, CryoWood light to medium suturing. There are many, many needle holders. There's a lot of needle holders. So how I learned them was just by doing the sets over and over again. In the beginning, I would have to go, well, let's see, it says I supposed to have 2 CryoWoods and then 2 male Hegers, and I'd have to hold them up next to each other and see, like, these are skinnier and these are fatter. So this CryoWoods are skinnier. So here's my 2 CryoWoods. Open them up, inspect them, put them in the set. Scissors are also very difficult to learn, and it takes practice. Maybe you'll get it quicker than me. That'd be good. All right. There's a lot of forceps. The pictures of forceps on page 187. I call this handle, this tweezer handle, I call it the generic forceps handle because it's not different. It's not unique in any way. It's just a generic forceps, kind of like a tweezers. So a tissue forceps, the primary function is to manipulate tissues. A design of this tweezer style forceps is the multiple teeth configuration at the distal tips. So they may have a 1x2 teeth or a 3x2 teeth. Super common is 1x2. You should inspect for teeth and proper alignment. It says inspect for teeth because sometimes teeth can get bent or completely broken off. And the serration in the middle of the handle where the surgeon holds onto it, and she's got her bloody gloves on, that, you need to check that for bioburden. It holds on to bioburden pretty well. And then at the proximal end where it says inspect for cracks, this is a point at which an instrument is constantly being flexed here, right? Constantly being flexed. They do crack. So you need to inspect that for cracks. I've seen where the whole instrument just comes apart in 2 pieces because it's 2 pieces of metal that are welded together. Forceps are measured in length. So you have next to that a dressing forceps. Might not be that easy to see in the picture, but the dressing forceps has serrations but no teeth. So tissue has teeth, dressing has serrations. Tissue forceps primary purpose is to hold on to tissues, flesh, and then the dressing forceps primary purpose is to do something like pack surgical sites or manipulate tissues, but really packing surgical sites. Imagine trying to pack gauze into an incision and it's got a tooth on the forceps, and every time you pull the forceps away from the incision, it pulls the gauze back with it. So they need something like this. Retractors. There are many, many retractors. And that is going to be in part 2 of this video. Thank you for watching.